Right now, perhaps in your backyard, or in a place you'll never visit, a plant is growing that has traditionally been used for its potential to support cellular health, aid neurological function, or manage physiological responses. But what if the properties of this plant are not widely known in modern traditional medicine? I know this sounds extreme. I know it sounds like the kind of thing someone tells you right before they try to sell you something. So let me be very clear from the start. Everything you hear today is backed by peer-reviewed scientific research, published, cited, real, and yet none of these plants are on your doctor's prescription pad. None are advertised on your favorite TV show. None are sitting on the shelves of your local pharmacy. Why? Because you cannot patent a plant. You cannot own a tree that has been growing for 10,000 years. And so quietly, the knowledge of these plants was buried, hidden inside ancient manuscripts, locked within the traditions of indigenous healers deep in the Amazon, the Himalayas, and the forests of West Africa, known by monks, shamans, and desert travelers, but virtually unknown to you until today. Today, we are opening that vault. We will examine 20 plants that most people have never even heard of. Plants so powerful, so scientifically validated, and yet so completely ignored by mainstream medicine that you will gain a new perspective on healing. And I promise you, the plant at number 14 reveals astonishing properties that you will find truly remarkable. Let's begin. The intelligence of nature, zoopharmacognosy. There is a word used by ethnobotanists, scientists who study the relationship between plants and human cultures, zoopharmacognosy. This term refers to the behavior of animals seeking out specific plants when they are ill. Chimpanzees in Tanzania have been observed chewing and swallowing the bitter leaves of a plant called Vernonia amygdalina when infected with parasites. This same plant has been used for centuries by local healers for the exact same purpose. Elephants in Kenya travel miles outside their normal habitat to find specific trees before giving birth, because the bark of these trees induces labor. Cats eat grass to expel toxins. Bears eat specific roots after hibernation to restart their digestive systems. Animals know. They know without universities, laboratories, or clinical trials, because this knowledge is written into the oldest software in existence, the survival intelligence of the living beings on this planet. What is extraordinary about this moment is that modern science is finally catching up to antiquity. Researchers at Harvard, Johns Hopkins, and universities worldwide are validating, one by one, what the ancient world already knew. The plants I am about to discuss are not folk tales. They are mysterious, powerful, and forgotten medicinal plants almost entirely unknown in the modern world. And by the time we reach the 20th plant, you will never look at a forest, a field, or even a weed the same way again. 1. Cat's claw, the vine. The Amazon cannot do without deep in the Peruvian Amazon, where the air is so thick with oxygen it feels like drinking water, grows a woody vine called Uncaria tomentosa. The Ashaninka people of Peru have used this plant for at least 2,000 years for severe arthritis, tumors, and resistant infections. They believe this vine was so powerful that only their most experienced healers were allowed to harvest it, and only after a ceremony to ask permission from the forest itself. Western science ignored this for decades. Then something happened. Researchers at the University of Innsbruck began isolating alkaloids, compounds called oxindole alkaloids, from cat's claw, and what they found changed everything. These molecules, unique to this plant, were doing things that should have been impossible. They were stimulating the production of white blood cells. They regulated the immune system to soothe overactive responses, like those in autoimmune diseases, while simultaneously enhancing the immune system's ability to find and destroy abnormal cells. A study published in the journal Phytomedicine revealed that cat's claw significantly inhibited the in vitro growth of human breast cancer cells. Another study by researchers in Italy showed it could reduce DNA damage in human cells exposed to radiation. Perhaps most remarkably, a clinical trial at Albany Medical College in New York found that patients with osteoarthritis who took cat's claw extract experienced a significant and measurable reduction in pain within just 4 weeks, with no serious side effects. 2. Bacopa monnieri, the brain plant of Vedic sages. The human mind forgets. It forgets words, instructions, and the thousands of sacred verses that were meant to be passed down without error through generations. The ancient solution wasn't to write everything down. It was a plant. Bacopa monnieri, a small creeping herb growing in the wetlands of India and Southeast Asia, is known in Ayurveda as Brahmi, named after Brahma, the Hindu god of creation and knowledge. For over 3,000 years, Brahmi has been given to children starting Vedic education to accelerate learning, to monks preparing for long meditations, and to court physicians. The Karaka Samhita, an ancient text written over 2,000 years ago, states that Brahmi supports intelligence, voice, memory, longevity, and the eradication of disease. Modern science is now proving this. In 2001, researchers at the University of Wollongong in Australia conducted a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial, the gold standard of modern science, and gave Bacopa extract to 76 adults for 12 weeks. The results were striking. The Bacopa group showed significant improvements in learning rate, memory consolidation, and visual information processing speed compared to the placebo group. Since then, over 30 clinical studies have been conducted, nearly all showing that Bacopa truly and measurably improves memory and cognitive function, especially in adults over 55. Furthermore, a 2012 study published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology found that bacosides could repair damaged neurons by increasing the production of proteins involved in neuron regeneration. 3. Lion's mane. Mushroom, the secret of monks' immortal focus. Monks who consumed this mushroom didn't eat it for its flavor, though it tastes remarkably like crab or lobster. They ate it because it made them think better. It allowed them to meditate deeper. It made the mind feel clear, open, and eternally alert. For centuries, this was accepted as wisdom. If you eat the lion's mane, the lion's mind follows. Then, in the 1990s, a Japanese scientist named Dr. Hirokazu Kawagishi found the responsible molecules. Inside the lion's mane mushroom are two extraordinary compounds found nowhere else in nature, hericenones and erinacines. These molecules do something that, until recently, scientists believed was impossible. They cross the blood-brain barrier and directly stimulate the production of nerve growth factor, NGF. NGF is the protein responsible for the growth, maintenance, and repair of neurons. Essentially, it acts as fertilizer for your brain cells. A mushroom can signal your brain to produce new neurons, not just protect existing ones, but generate new ones. Researchers have stated this is a very exciting compound that could be developed for treating Alzheimer's and other neurological conditions. 4. Andrographis, the king of bitters. There is a plant so bitter that those who encounter it for the first time often physically recoil. Its scientific name is Andrographis paniculata. It has been used in the traditional medicine of India, China, and Southeast Asia for over 2,000 years, known as the king of bitters. Ancient Ayurveda texts recommended it for fevers, liver ailments, and heat toxins, a category that aligns closely with what we now call systemic inflammation and bacterial infection. On the scientific side, the main compound in Andrographis, called andrographilide, has been studied extensively. A meta-analysis of 7 randomized controlled trials published in the Journal of Clinical Pharmacy and Therapeutics concluded that Andrographis extract significantly reduced both the severity and duration of upper respiratory tract infections, often outperforming standard over-the-counter medications. 5. Pau d'arco, the bark the Incas used against the darkness. Indigenous peoples of South America have used the inner bark of Tabebuia impetigonosa, or pau d'arco, for at least 2,000 years. The Calawaya healers of Bolivia used this bark for ailments they described as dark things growing inside the body, tumors, fungal infections, and resistant parasites. They were meticulous about the preparation. Only the inner bark was used, and it was always brewed in clay or wood vessels, never metal. The compound that makes pau d'arco extraordinary is lapachol, and its derivative, beta-lapachone. When researchers at the National Cancer Institute in the U.S. began studying lapachol in the 1960s, They found it possessed real anti-tumor activity in animal studies. Many studies have since shown that beta-lactoferrin triggers apoptosis, programmed cell death, in human cancer cells, while remaining relatively harmless to healthy cells. 6. Elecampane, the forgotten queen of European herbalism. Once so revered in Europe that the Romans cultivated it as medicine and the Greeks created myths around it, elecampane, Anula helenium, was a staple in all major European botanical texts. In medieval European monasteries, elecampane root was the primary prescription for lung ailments like tuberculosis and bronchitis. The reason? Elecampane root is rich in sesquiterpene lactones, specifically allantollactone. These molecules are among the most powerful natural antibacterials ever tested against Mycobacterium tuberculosis. A study in phytotherapy research revealed that a specific compound from elecampane root killed over 99% of dormant tuberculosis bacteria, including strains resistant to standard antibiotics. 7. Skullcap, the nerve tonic that calmed revolutions. In the 18th and 19th centuries, American herbalists turned to skullcap, Scutellaria lateriflora, to treat the tremors, insomnia, and anxiety brought on by the Industrial Revolution. Indigenous North American tribes like the Cherokee and Iroquois had used it for centuries for ceremonial purposes and emotional distress. Today, research describes skullcap as containing bicholine, one of the most pharmacologically active natural compounds known. Bicholine modulates the same GABA receptors targeted by drugs like Valium and Xanax, but without the dependency, cognitive dulling, or withdrawal effects that make pharmaceutical anxiolytics so problematic. 8. Shatavari, the herb of 100 roots. In Sanskrit, the name means she who has 100 husbands, an ancient way of saying this plant gives a woman the strength and vitality to handle 100 demands without being depleted. Shatavari, Asparagus racemosus, has been at the center of Ayurvedic women's medicine for over 5,000 years as a rasayana, a herb that rejuvenates and restores. Scientific research shows that shatavari roots contain steroidal saponins called shatavarins, which have adaptogenic effects on the hormonal system. Rather than pushing hormones in one direction, they regulate them up or down based on the body's needs. 9. Nigella, sativa, the seed called cure for everything except death. Black seed, Nigella sativa, was found in Tutankhamun's tomb and has been used for over 1,400 years in the Islamic world. It contains over 100 documented chemical compounds, the most vital being thymoquinone. In the last 2 decades, over 900 studies have been published on thymoquinone. These studies found it to be one of the broadest spectrum active natural compounds ever identified, showing anti-tumor activity against over 20 different types of cancer cells, including pancreatic cancer. It also kills antibiotic-resistant bacteria like MRSA. A 2013 study found it effective against 97% of tested MRSA samples. 10. Copal tree, Bursera, the Aztec surgeon's secret weapon. The Aztecs possessed a medical system of extraordinary sophistication, and at its center for wound care was copal resin from Bursera trees. It was applied to wounds to stop bleeding, prevent infection, and accelerate healing. Modern pharmacological analysis reveals that copal resin is high in triterpenoids and boswellic acids, compounds closely related to those found in Boswellia serrata, frankincense. Studies have shown that copal resin inhibits the growth of Staphylococcus aureus and E. coli with an efficiency that rivals standard topical antibiotics. Furthermore, a study in the FASAB journal found that burning this resin activates ion channels in the brain that alleviate anxiety and depression. Before we move to number 11, trust me, you don't want to miss 11 through 14, I want to address a common question. Where do you actually find these plants? Because the market is largely unregulated, many products labeled lion's mane or cat's claw contain fillers or incorrect parts of the plant. When I speak of these plants working, I am referring to high-quality, standardized preparations. Now back to the plants. 11. Bitter melon, Momordica carrantia, the plant that rivals metformin. Across more than 50 countries, One plant consistently appears in traditional systems for sweet urine disease, what we call diabetes. This is bitter melon, Momordica carrantia. For centuries, separate cultures independently concluded that this bitter fruit had a powerful effect on blood sugar. Research confirms this. Bitter melon contains at least 4 groups of compounds, including charantan and polypeptide P, that create an insulin-like effect in the body. They activate the AMPK enzyme, which is the same target as the pharmaceutical drug metformin. A meta-analysis of 11 clinical trials found that bitter melon significantly reduced fasting blood sugar in type 2 diabetes patients. 12. Saffron. The golden thread between grief and joy. Beyond being the world's most expensive spice, saffron, Crocus sativus, is now being taken seriously by modern psychiatry. Clinical studies have shown that saffron can be one of the most effective natural treatments for clinical depression. Meta-analyses of over 20 randomized controlled trials concluded that saffron significantly improved depression symptoms compared to placebo, with performance comparable to pharmaceutical antidepressants like Prozac, but with far fewer side effects. 13. Kava. Kava, the Pacific Island secret that scares Big Pharma. In the South Pacific, the roots of kava, Piper methysticum, are used to create a drink that produces deep calm without the cloudiness of alcohol. It produces the anxiolytic effects that pharmaceutical companies spend billions trying to mimic, yet it is non-addictive and does not impair cognitive function. The Cochrane Systematic Review, the highest standard of medical evidence, analyzed 12 trials and found clear, statistically significant evidence that kava is effective for anxiety disorders. 14. Graviola, soursop, the rainforest plant that defeated an unnamed drug giant. From the 1970s to the 1990s, a major American pharmaceutical company researched the graviola tree, Annona muricata. They discovered that compounds called acetogenins in the plant selectively inhibited the growth of cancer cells in the lab with extraordinary potency. In some cases, 10,000 times more potent than standard chemotherapy drugs. Critically, these compounds targeted cancer cells while leaving healthy cells largely untouched. Because the molecules were too complex to synthesize and patent, the company eventually shelved the project. However, a Purdue University study funded by the National Cancer Institute later confirmed that graviola acetogenins are selectively toxic to drug-resistant human breast and pancreatic cancer cell lines. 15. Japanese knotweed, the invasive weed with extraordinary levels of resveratrol. Here lies one of the greatest ironies of modern herbal medicine. Resveratrol, the compound that triggered a billion-dollar industry in red wine supplements, graced the covers of major magazines as the longevity molecule and is the subject of Harvard professor David Sinclair's famous research on aging, is found in red wine at about 1.5 milligrams per glass. However, the plant containing 10 times higher levels of resveratrol grows as an invasive weed in the cracks of sidewalks across North America, Europe, and Australia, and municipalities spend millions every year trying to eradicate it. Resveratrol's ability to activate sirtuins, proteins that regulate aging, DNA repair, and cellular energy metabolism, has been documented in hundreds of peer-reviewed studies. At a cellular level, it mimics the effects of caloric restriction, the same metabolic state associated with extreme longevity across multiple species. Studies on resveratrol have shown a reduction in inflammation markers, improved insulin sensitivity, reduced oxidation of LDL cholesterol, and the inhibition of cancer cell proliferation in multiple tumor types. But Japanese knotweed offers something beyond just resveratrol. Its root is one of the richest known sources of pyxetanol, an even more active metabolite of resveratrol, as well as imodin, a compound with potent anti-inflammatory and potential anti-cancer properties. Traditional Chinese medicine has used the root for over a millennium under the name Hu Jiang, specifically for liver ailments, joint pain, and conditions described in ancient texts as blood stasis. The bitter irony is that governments spend massive resources fighting a plant that their citizens could be using as medicine. Standardized extracts of Japanese knotweed containing 50% trans resveratrol are widely available, and represent one of the most cost-effective ways to reach the resveratrol levels used in clinical research. 16. Sweet Annie, Artemisia annua, the Nobel Prize-winning weed. This is perhaps the most striking story on this list. In 1969, at the height of the Vietnam War, the People's Republic of China launched a secret military research program called Project 523. Its mission was to find a cure for malaria, which was killing North Vietnamese soldiers at devastating rates and rendering existing drugs useless due to resistance. A young pharmacologist named Tu Youyou went back to the oldest manuscripts she could find. In a Taoist text from 340 AD, written by the physician Ge Hong, she found a description of a plant called Qing Hao used with a remarkably simple preparation. The plant was soaked in cold water and wrung out. It was not boiled. It was not extracted with heat, just cold water. This detail, the emphasis on cold water instead of heat, led Tu Youyou to realize the active compound was heat-sensitive. She changed her extraction method, and the results were immediate and extraordinary. The plant was Artemisia annua, Sweet Annie, a wild herb that grows on roadsides and in neglected soil. The compound Tu Youyou extracted was artemisinin. The traditional uses of Artemisia annua have shown remarkable results against malaria, and modern studies continue to investigate its efficacy even against drug-resistant strains. 17. Wood. Betony, the vanished protector of the Middle Ages. In medieval Europe, there was a saying, "Sell your coat and buy betony." It was considered so essential, so broad in its medicinal impact, and so fundamental to health, that this advice, to spend everything you have if necessary to acquire this plant, was seen as perfectly logical wisdom. Stachys betonica, or wood betony, appears in Anglo-Saxon herbals, the medical writings of the Italian school of Salerno, Arabic medical manuscripts, and nearly every European botanical text written before the 19th century. It was recommended for headaches, digestive disorders, anxiety, liver ailments, nervous exhaustion, and weak memory. And then, with the rise of pharmaceutical medicine in the 20th century, it almost completely vanished from mainstream use. This is extraordinary because emerging research suggests the medieval world was right. Wood betony contains unique stachydrine alkaloids and diterpene compounds that have a significant effect on the nervous system, specifically the parasympathetic nervous system, which governs the body's rest and repair state. 18. Morinda citrifolia, noni. The Polynesian plant called the painkiller. The Polynesian people of the Pacific, voyagers who crossed the world's largest ocean in open canoes, did not travel light. On every journey, they carried a specific selection of plants deemed essential for survival and medicine. Morinda citrifolia, noni, was always among them. Always. The fruit of the noni plant is not attractive. It is white, lumpy, and has an extremely unpleasant odor, like a mix of blue cheese and overripe fruit. They used this painkiller tree for muscle pain, joint pain, fever, infection, and general malaise. They applied the leaves as salves for wounds. Hawaiians viewed this knowledge as sacred, shared only within lineages of healing. 19. Tulsi, holy basil. The queen of herbs at every Indian doorstep. In India, there is a plant found in the courtyard of almost every Hindu home and temple. It is touched every morning during prayer. Its name is Tulsi, holy basil, Ocimum sanctum. It is a close relative of the basil in your kitchen, but it sits in an entirely different pharmacological category. Tulsi is classified as an adaptogen, a plant that increases the body's non-specific resistance to physical, chemical, or emotional stress. Clinical studies have shown that Tulsi lowers levels of cortisol, the primary stress hormone, and regulates the HPA axis, the system that manages the body's entire stress response. A randomized controlled trial published in the Journal of Ayurveda and Integrative Medicine found that Tulsi supplementation significantly reduced cognitive impairment, stress, and blood sugar in type 2 diabetes patients. 20. Chanca piedra, the stone breaker. We end our journey with a plant that has one of the most descriptive names in herbal medicine. Philanthus neruri is known in Spanish as Chanca piedra, or the stone breaker. It earned this name because healers in the Amazon basin have used this small, unassuming plant for centuries for one specific and startling purpose: dissolving kidney stones. Given that kidney stones affect more than 10% of the world's population and cause some of the most severe pain a human can experience, this is no small claim. A study conducted in Brazil and published in Urological Research documented a significant reduction in stone size over 12 weeks. In the Chanca Piedra group, 94% of patients saw a reduction or total disappearance of their stones, compared to 32% in the control group. Research also suggests it works by relaxing the ureter, making the passage of remaining fragments significantly less painful. We have reached the end of a journey encompassing the world's 20 most powerful, yet overlooked plants. From the vine-covered depths of the Amazon, to the high monasteries of the Himalayas, to the riverine swamps of ancient India, to the courtyard shrines of Hindu homes, to the sacred temple gardens of the Aztecs. Throughout 3,000 years of human history, across every continent, among languages and cultures that have never touched one another, people have always reached the same conclusion. The world heals, not in a metaphorical sense, not in a spiritual sense, though perhaps in a spiritual sense as well, literally, chemically, biologically. The earth produces compounds that interact with human cells to provide protection, repair, and healing. And the people closest to the earth, healers, shamans, monks, indigenous healers, have mapped this realm with extraordinary care through thousands of years of patient observation. And then the modern world decided it knew better. Look, I'm not anti-medicine. I don't want you to throw away your prescriptions or ignore your doctor's advice. Modern medicine saves lives. Surgery saves lives. Antibiotics save lives. However, by focusing primarily on pharmaceutical solutions, we may have inadvertently limited our perspective. We could benefit from integrating the vast library of human knowledge accumulated over thousands of years. This could offer additional pathways to address the rise in chronic disease rates, a problem that was less documented in the old world. What I'm asking of you is simpler. Rethink. Look at the plants growing around you with fresh eyes. Understand that you are a biological being living on a biological planet, and that this planet has been solving biological problems for a very long time. Understand that 50 distinct ancient cultures with no contact between them independently reached the same conclusion about the same plant. This is evidence. Strong evidence. Strong. The kind of evidence that no drug trial could ever match in depth or duration. These plants aren't your only medicine, but they deserve to be a part of your medicine. They deserve to be understood, respected, and used with the same care and intention that every healer throughout human history has shown them. Now, I want to know which of these plants surprised you the most. Write in the comments. Is it sweet anise, which came with the Nobel Prize? Chanca Piedra, which dissolves kidney stones? Graviola, which the pharmaceutical company withdrew? Or lion's mane, with its ability to grow new neurons? Tell me, I read every comment, and your answer will help shape the next video on this channel because we've only scratched the surface so far. There are hundreds more plants like these. If this video has sparked something in you, a question, a curiosity, a desire to learn more, then click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Because this channel exists for exactly this purpose: to rediscover what has been forgotten, to translate the wisdom of the ancient world into the language of the modern world, to remind you time and again that the answers to most of our most pressing problems aren't lying before some unborn researcher. They're in a library that's been there for thousands of years, in the soil, in the leaves. They've always been there. We've just stopped looking. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.